Welcome to The Window on talkSPORT, brought to you by Intuit Quickbooks. Save time and unlock growth with integrated business tools and AI automation all in one place. Yes, guys, welcome back to The Window, and we are joined once again by talkSPORT's very own transfer guru, transfer expert, Ben Jacobs. Ben, how are you, my friend? You good?
Everything is good. Not long to go now before the window shuts.
Yes, I'm sure you'll be relieved. You've earned a long break, a long week of rest once the window has ended, but it hasn't ended, so let's get to it. I know you've been working alongside Alex Crook on a story that broke on the website today. Micky van de Ven, the Tottenham centre-back. Can you shed any more light on Micky van de Ven's future?
Yeah, my understanding is that Tottenham's valuation of Micky van de Ven is in excess of 100 million. And were they to sanction a sale, not now, but in the summer, that number would actually be closer to a British transfer record. So there's a lot of noise at the moment about Micky van de Ven and Liverpool in particular. Liverpool are drawing up a shortlist for a centre-back. And this has been on their list for quite some time because they need an eventual heir to Virgil van Dijk, and Ibrahima Konate's future is still uncertain. No progress yet in those contract talks. We can't yet say that Liverpool have decided to go for Van de Ven, nor can we say there's been any inquiry or club-to-club contact. But Van de Ven and his family have already put it out there in previous interviews that Liverpool was the club that they watched growing up, and that's where the family affiliation is. And I think this is why some Liverpool fans are starting to get excited that it's not Mark Gahey who went to Man City, but maybe it's going to be Micky van de Ven. Price could be an issue. Like I say, Tottenham would expect British transfer record money, even if Micky van de Ven ends up over the course of the coming months having less than 2 years left on his contract. And in addition to that, Van de Ven is going to wait and see how this Spurs project runs before determining whether he is or isn't going to engage over talks surrounding an extension. So, of course, Tottenham would love Van de Ven to extend and put an end to any speculation, but he's going to wait and see things like, do Tottenham get Champions League? How far can they go in the Champions League this season? What's going to happen with Thomas Frank? There's too many variables out there, and all that means is that Van de Ven is going to delay formally engaging with Tottenham over a new deal, and we wait and see whether Liverpool make their move come summer.
Well, you mentioned Liverpool there, and obviously they did miss out on Mark Gahey to Manchester City. Myself and you were talking about Gahey last week. Could we see a similar spending spree that Liverpool done last summer? I mean, they spent in excess of £400 million, Ben. Could we see similar things this summer?
I think Liverpool are going to be active. They're never going to spend above the odds. They didn't go for Mark Gahey despite having urgency for a centre-back because the Liverpool strategy is really clear. If a player wants to join, they wait for Liverpool, and Liverpool wait to get value. So a lot of people asking, why wouldn't Liverpool have gone mid-season for Mark Gahey and rivalled Man City? First reason is that if Mark Gahey really wanted Anfield, then Liverpool were prepared to wait, and Gahey would have had to done a similar approach as well. But the other factor in all of this is if Liverpool had entered the race, then Crystal Palace would have had a bidding war. So it's really easy in hindsight to say that Liverpool could have got the Man City deal, 20 million plus add-ons. And yet, who's to say if Liverpool had said, we want to come in, Palace wouldn't have said, we now want way more, in excess of the 35 million that Liverpool had agreed over the summer. So Liverpool are experts at reading the market, and they're never going to pay crazily above the odds. And they're always going to try and do things on their terms, and they don't want to be influenced by another club. So as a consequence, it's proactive, not reactive. And that's why Liverpool didn't enter the race for Mark Gahey. And had Gahey wanted Liverpool, he'd have had to play the season at Crystal Palace and then leave for Anfield on a free transfer. In terms of money over the summer, Liverpool has still got a number of pressing priorities. The first is that eventual heir to Virgil van Dijk. They might even need more than one defender in the long run anyway, if Virgil van Dijk goes in 2027 and Ibrahima Konate doesn't extend, even though the highly regarded Giovanni Leone is coming back from an ACL injury. Midfield could be a point of discussion for Liverpool too, I'm told. And then again, an eventual heir, like with Van Dijk, for Mo Salah as well. And you could make an argument that Liverpool, who didn't really want Luis Diaz to go to Bayern over the summer, could actually find a left winger too. Maybe they're going to kind of aggregate the need for a wide player and get one player that can just as comfortably go on the right or the left. And that was where Liverpool's initial interest in Antoine Semenyo came from too. So they did a lot of work. They spent a lot of money. But I still think from Liverpool's perspective, summer is going to have significant first-team business as well. We wait and see if financially it's as high as that total 450 million spend if you include the add-ons. But regardless of the prices paid, Liverpool will still be looking to get 2 or 3 through the door come summer.
Well, let's watch that space and see how Micky van der Ven's future goes. But let's go to another London club, Ben. Jean-Philippe Mateta. I mean, it's been the week from hell for Crystal Palace fans. You have to have a bit of sympathy for them. But I understand Jean-Philippe Mateta is looking for a move away from the club this month.
Yeah, I think Jean-Philippe Mateta is making it clear to Crystal Palace he wants to go. Palace may dig in here, so let's see whether or not they are as open to an exit as Mateta, because they weren't when Juventus made an offer of a loan plus an obligation and Palace said no. So there's a few conditions here that have to happen for Mateta to get his move away. The first is financial. Mateta's looking for a wage of in the region of 150,000, and that means his base wage at Palace will have to be more than doubled. So any suitor needs to match those wage demands, otherwise Mateta will likely just wait until summer. Second of all, Palace's valuation is £40 million. And third, Palace will likely have to find a replacement. And I'm not so sure that Sadiki Sheriff counts, because he was a target that Palace have been trying for regardless of Mateta. So it might have to be Sadiki Sheriff plus one extra attacker. So this is complicated. Palace value Mateta at £45 million. If we go back to last year, Mateta was really prioritising Serie A, Milan, and then Juventus. But now he is open to a move from within the Premier League. So Villa have made an initial inquiry, and any advancement on that inquiry may be contingent upon if Tammy Abraham gets over the line, because I think Villa would like to do that deal if possible. And Abraham has already agreed to it. It's just about finding a way out of Besiktas rather than negotiating with Roma. And if there's a breakthrough there, I think Villa will back off Jean-Philippe Mateta. But if they can't get Tammy Abraham, Mateta and Villa is one to watch. And then again, as a knock-on effect in this sort of domino of market movement, if Mateta goes, I expect Crystal Palace to be pretty instantly spending any money they bring in for the French striker. And that's where Jorgen Strand-Larsen, the Wolves forward, might be one to watch. And it's fascinating that in the same way that Palace value Mateta at 40 million, Wolves want 40 million for Strand-Larsen. So naturally, if you're Wolves, you're going to be sticking to that valuation if Mateta goes for 40 million and telling Crystal Palace you've got to spend all of the Mateta money on Strand-Larsen. But this could be a developing story. Strand-Larsen is the player that Wolves will sell. They had earlier interest in the window from West Ham, but the valuation was too high. And there is a bit of a connection here which suggests maybe there's substance and likelihood, if Mateta goes, that Strand-Larsen and Crystal Palace could develop. And the link is Matt Hobbs, who was the sporting director that brought Jorgen Strand-Larsen to Wolves and is now in charge of Crystal Palace's recruitment. So I think we're going to see a little bit of movement in and possibly some movement out of Crystal Palace. But don't be surprised if Palace dig in a little bit on Mateta, because they're not desperate to give him a move away. But if Sadiki was to arrive, if they could find another attacker like Strand-Larsen, then maybe, just maybe, in the final days of the window, it paves the way for Mateta to leave, even though it's worth stressing that Palace's preference would just be for only Sadiki to come in, to not have that much crazy movement, and for Mateta to see out the season, because that's the more stable way of looking at things, as Crystal Palace have already had a lot of flux this window.
Yeah, I mean, stability is something Crystal Palace need, especially with Glasner announcing his departure at the end of the season. I mean, a name you you mentioned there, Ben, Sadiki Sheriff, I mean, I couldn't quite believe it when you told me before we came on air that Wrexham, the championship club, have an interest in him as well. Can you shed any light on that?
Yeah, I mean, reports suggest Wrexham have an interest. My understanding is actually Wrexham haven't bid, so there might be some games going on at this stage. It would be audacious and ambitious, and naturally there's a fair few reports out there that speak about things developing. But I'm told that this might be a little bit of a red herring, and that Palace and Angers are locked in negotiations. Palace are optimistic they can agree a fee with Angers. From the French side's perspective, they wanted, when the talks first started, 25 million euros, and Palace were more around the 17 million euros. Now I think they're going to meet middle ground in and around the 20 million euros mark, but bonuses, sell-ons and agent fees have all kind of been stumbling blocks. So it's definitely not been an easy negotiation. And now, just as they get close, apparently Wrexham are prepared to pay 90 million English pounds, which is about 25 million euros, which is the original price that Angers wants. And my gut instinct on this one says that's part of games. And even though Wrexham are not commenting officially on whether they're interested in the player, those close to Sheriff say they've had no contact at the time we're recording with Wrexham, and the player's preference is to go to Crystal Palace. He's had options as well from Milan and Frankfurt as well. But I think this is last-minute gamesmanship. And at the end of the day, if Sheriff is to go anywhere, Crystal Palace remains his most likely destination if they can sort out the complications around agent commissions and bonuses and a sell-on clause.
I mean, Ben, this is a bit of a question putting you on the spot here, so do forgive me. But Wrexham, they're only 2 or 3 points away from the playoff places to get into the Premier League. If they were to get into the Premier League, obviously they're very ambitious owners there. How ambitious are the owners? I mean, if they're looking to rival Premier League clubs for players, surely their ambition it has no end.
Yeah, the ambition is sky high, but with the constant back-to-back-to-back promotions, the challenge is that your infrastructure and your finances have to catch up with the ambition. So Wrexham's model when they were lower league and even out of the Football League was always about the highest wage bill and bringing players that were actually League One, League Two standard down to non-league. And then you have a foundation where as you get into League Two, League One, your squad was always League Two or League One, and your wage bill in each of those leagues was always the highest. Now they've entered into the Championship, and they've also spent a fair amount of money, and they've made 1 or 2 opportunistic signings like Josh Windass because of his Sheffield Wednesday situation. But I'm not actually so sure if they got promoted that the finances and the infrastructure could that quickly be middle or higher echelons of the Premier League. They would have to be conservative, and statistically in coming up to the Premier League, you're more likely to go down than stay up or certainly finish in the top half and really consolidate. So it would actually be a challenge for Wrexham, an incredibly exciting one, and one that the owners would want, because you're not turning down the ability to just keep succeeding and going up. And Phil Parkinson's done a fantastic job after a slightly difficult and ropey start to the season, and they are in the picture for the playoffs. But for their finances and for their long-term model, it wouldn't actually be a bad thing if they just consolidated in the Championship for a few years, because if you come up too quickly to the Premier League, you can sometimes be forced to overextend. And Wrexham are still trying to do everything, build their model, build their sporting structure, own and develop their own training centre, redevelop their stadium. If suddenly everyone needs a Premier League wage and you need Premier League transfer fees and all of that, it isn't actually an unlimited pool of money from this ownership group, which is why recently they've engaged and taken strategic investment, but the ambition is limitless. They almost have to be careful in some ways that they don't move too fast before they can have that stability and consolidation. So Wrexham fans listening will be going, why are you saying that? We just want to be a Premier League club. And if they become a Premier League club, it will be one of the greatest stories in football. But you could also argue perversely, if they do go up, the summer and the first season in the Premier League will be one of the biggest challenges financially and in terms of infrastructure to that project. So I think many neutrals hope it happens because we followed and watched the documentary. It's a Hollywood story, it's a fairy tale and all of that. But as I say, they can't just walk into the Premier League and throw a bottomless pool of cash.
A club in the Premier League that has all the riches but can't seem to spend them is Newcastle. I understand they're on the hunt for a versatile defender.
Yeah, I think Newcastle are going to do something. So plan B at the moment is Matt Targett comes back from Middlesbrough. And usually when a player has a recall clause mid-season, it expires, give or take, about now, to give the club that has that player either time to find a replacement or peace of mind that they're going to see the season out. Newcastle have been able to extend that recall clause. So at the time we're live, they still have the option to bring Matt Targett back. The fact they've not just done it, despite their defensive crisis, tells you in likelihood that they're scouring the market for younger options in case the right opportunity presents itself. And if they don't find a name, maybe they revert back and Matt Targett returns to St James's Park from Middlesbrough. You have Toulouse's Dejan Mathali, who's a left-back or centre-half. He's one name and possibility, and an initial inquiry has taken place. They've scouted the Club Brugge left-back, Joaquin Seis, who's also capable of playing in other positions. But Bruges don't really want to sell now, so let's see whether Newcastle decide to develop that situation. Then there's Thiago Gabriel at Lecce, who is another one on their radar, and Lecce would be prepared to sell now. And on the right-hand side, which would be kind of Tino Livramento cover, you've also got Brooke Norton-Cuffy, who spent his academy time with Arsenal, even though he never made a Premier League appearance, and Chelsea as well. And I'm told that Norton-Cuffy is available for somewhere around £50 million or 20 million euros. Genoa are prepared to sell. You've got Everton, Newcastle, West Ham that have all made club-to-club inquiries in this window, but also Napoli and Juventus as well. So given the volume of interest, there is a possibility that Norton-Cuffy leaves Genoa this winter too. So there's several young options, some on the left-hand side, some on the right-hand side, some that are capable of playing fullback or centre-back, which is exactly the kind of versatility that Eddie Howe needs. But if they can't get a young profile over the line now, or if they find a young profile and they think, one for the future, we don't want to chuck them in straight at the deep end, maybe they come back for some of the names that I've mentioned over the summer and then at the last minute decide to bring Targett back, because obviously he's the kind of player that knows the club and could be thrown straight in as a squad player until Newcastle's defensive crisis lessens a little bit.
I mean, another big Premier League club that are looking for a defender, and you've been right across this story, Ben. Jeremy Jacquet, the young French wonder kid, if you will, from Rennes. What's the latest there? It seems to have gone quiet in the last few days.
I think Chelsea are trying. They want to add a starting centre-back, and they believe that Jeremy Jacquet is that player. But Rennes, as we revealed on talkSPORT, want 65 million euros or more, because that would be a record sale, surpassing the 64 million euros that saw Jeremy Doku move to Manchester City from France. And Chelsea don't want to go that high. Their valuation means that there's a gulf. And I think Rennes mid-season, knowing that Chelsea have got somewhat an urgency to bring in a centre-back now, even though it looks like they've got a lot of options, but they obviously want to try and back Liam Rosenior. So Rennes are sticking to their valuation. There might be a middle ground here where Chelsea pre-agree or Chelsea loan back to Rennes, because it's not only about a golf and valuation. It's about Rennes essentially saying when the player extended his contract until 2029, they wanted him to remain until at least the summer. And now that Rennes are pushing to maybe qualify for Champions League football, they're even more adamant that Jeremy Jacquet should stay unless, one, it's a record sale, or two, there's a way of pre-agreeing it so Chelsea can get ahead of their suitors that might rival them in the summer and keep the player at Rennes, which could also reduce the overall terms and make either the structure or the overall valuation more preferable to Chelsea. Jacobo Ramon at Como is another on the list. I sense Real Madrid might trigger the buyback clause in the summer and the player is open to returning to the Bernabeu. But if that doesn't happen, then Como are aware of other suitors, including Chelsea and Tottenham Hotspur, and actually one or two tell me Newcastle United as well. And this would be fascinating, not for the winter, in my opinion, but maybe the summer. Because if you've got a buyback, which is believed for Real Madrid to be complicated, but in the region of only 7 million euros, should somebody come in earlier in the winter and say to Como, even though he's only been there since the summer, we'll pay double, triple the Real Madrid buyback, then you may have a situation where Como prefer a sale to anyone but Real Madrid, but it's whether the player just wants to play a full season at Como and then see whether Real Madrid come in for him. So I think it's difficult because from what I'm told, the defender wants to stay at Como and Como don't want to sell as it stands. And Marcos Senesi is the other name on Chelsea's list. He's a free agent in the summer. Juventus have made an inquiry as well. At this stage, people that are speaking to Senesi from outside of England are going to the player camp to understand what he's leaning to as a free agent in the summer. And Bournemouth haven't had a single inquiry, and Chelsea have not made an approach to the player side or to Bournemouth. But if they can't get Jeremy Jacquet, let's see whether they pivot to another option or just decide to stick with the centre-backs that they've got. Wait, of course, for Levi Colwill to come back also from his ACL injury and then go for a starting centre-back instead in the summer. If they wait for Jacquet for the summer, Bayern could also enter that race as well.
Well, Jeremy Jacquet has a lot of options there, Ben, so we'll watch that space for the exciting wonder kid. I mean, lastly, Ben, before I let you go, Manchester United, are they looking to reward Michael Carrick? Of course, he got that huge win over Manchester City at Old Trafford over the weekend. Could they be in for a midfielder or any other positions?
So in the last few days of this window, and actually dating back to last week, Man United's recruitment team have had meetings with Michael Carrick. And because he's head coach, even though everyone knows it's only caretaker, but by title, he's head coach, he's being involved in recruitment like any other permanent manager would. And Manchester United are understanding from Carrick whether or not he feels another midfielder could come in, likely a short-term deal, a loan with a buy option. And if there's anything opportunistic, we still need to watch Manchester United. If nothing happens, Man United are going to paint this as that was always their plan. And that's probably true, to be honest, because the likes of Elliot Anderson, Carlos Baleba, Angelo Stiller, Adam Wharton and so on, none of these players were ever going to be available in the January market. Kobe Mainoo's situation has changed things too, because if it was Ruben Amorim, then you had Mainoo not playing, wanting to go on loan to Napoli. And as a consequence, it felt like they were a little bit thin because Manuel Ugarte has only been in and out the side and his form hasn't been great. But Mainoo, in some ways, feels like a new signing. So Man United want to understand from Carrick, is that enough for you? Now Mainoo suits the system and is part of Carrick's plans and he was outstanding in the Manchester derby. Or maybe something else could happen between now and the end of the window. But I don't sense it's going to be a Ruben Neves, a João Gomez, because the latter, £40 million or more. The former's got an Al Hilal extension offer on the table and a huge wage. So if they do something, my feeling is it will be surprise and it will be economical. Ruben Loftus-Cheek was offered to Man United, but they haven't bitten. And it's Villa, really, that are exploring that deal. So Man United have made no direct approach to Ruben Loftus-Cheek. It's the other way around. And they haven't said to the player side that they would like to start a negotiation there. So nothing to get excited about as far as he's concerned.
You've been watching The Window on talkSPORT, brought to you by Intuit Quickbooks. Save time and unlock growth with integrated business tools and AI automation all in one place.